So we want to welcome everybody to tonight's emergency gathering. But on the one hand, there'll probably be a lot of these. I think we're all aware of the extraordinary events that we have seen, but I don't know that we're all aware of the arc of those events. What we mean by that is those who have known persons associated with the LaRouche organization or with Lyndon LaRouche himself personally over the course of the past 5 decades know that we have a reputation, which we, in one sense, earned in the United States for what people like to call political extremism, like to call alarmism, like to call outrageous views. The problem involved is that we happen to have been right about nearly everything that we identified. The nature of what people have called the deep state is that it actually is very, very explicit. And we are seeing that acting right now, but it's acting out of desperation. This is not a United States-based operation. This is an international operation. We refer to this in various ways, and you'll hear various speakers refer to it. But the reason we're assembling is that it was noticed by us, and it would have to be noticed by us, that many of the American people, while they'd like perhaps to know what to do, are paralyzed right now by an inability to process what they're seeing. They sort of don't believe it because how could it be like this? And so what we're here to do tonight is to give you, first of all, a sense of the direction that the independent candidates, Diane Sare and Jose Vega, have taken in defense of the American presidency, and then have a few people with us tonight who do have a sense of direction and can say some things about that. And we'll be hearing from them shortly. So without taking more time, I'd like to go first to Diane Sare, United States Senate candidate from New York. Diane.
Thank you. I actually, not only because I'm just getting my voice back, but because I think people should hear it, I wanted to share a couple of minutes of forecasts from the late Lyndon LaRouche, because he clearly expresses what the backdrop is for the situation that we are now confronted by. So I think that this will work. Here we go.
There is no possibility of a non-collapse of the present financial system. None. It's finished now. The present financial system cannot continue to exist under any circumstances, under any presidency, under any leadership, or any leadership of nations. Only a fundamental and sudden change in the world monetary financial system will prevent a general, immediate, chain reaction type of collapse. At what speed, we don't know, but it will go on, and it will be unstoppable. And the longer it goes on, before coming to an end, the worse things will get.
So there was another forecast on that video from 2008, but July 25th, 2007 was 3 days before the monoline insurers went under, and then we later saw the crash of 2008, which everyone said was unpredictable, which everyone said was just the mortgages or crazy lending. And it wasn't. It was systemic. And what did we do after that crash? Well, we bailed out the main culprits that caused the crash at great expense to the American people and the people of the world, and continued about our merry way with the same policies. Now, the entire planet did not do that. And what Lyndon LaRouche had called for way back in 1975, an international development bank, had begun to come into existence a bit later, 2013, 2014, with the international development of the BRICS, the announcement by Xi Jinping of the Belt and Road Initiative, and in fact, now at this point with the BRICS Plus, you have the majority of the world's population moving in a direction which is not that of the transatlantic bankrupt liberal financial system. And it's very important that we first locate ourselves in this. I will say something else, which is that in 1988, Columbus Day, 1988, Lyndon and Helga Zeppel-LaRouche went to Berlin, where they gave a press conference calling for the reunification of Germany. And LaRouche said that given the bankrupt circumstances of the Soviet Union, the food shortages in places like Poland, that as a presidential candidate, he would propose that the United States feed Poland in return for the reunification of Germany. 4 months later, Lyndon LaRouche was in prison with a 15-year jail sentence. Henry Kissinger wrote a letter to the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board advising them to keep him in prison for the whole length of time. Kissinger, who reportedly had said that the worst thing he could think of is that Lyndon LaRouche would be on the scene when this transatlantic system finally collapsed. We are now in that. And what you see are the last gasps of a completely bankrupt empire, a $2 quadrillion bubble in the city of London, Wall Street, the New York Federal Reserve, the BIS, obligations that cannot possibly be met. Not that they're not trying. And what we all have the experience of being is like the aphids getting squeezed by the ants. We are paying into this, whether it is taxes, tolls, inflation on the price of food, inflation on the price of fuel. The migrants are being used merely as conduits for huge amounts of money, and no one cares of the people making this policy, whether they live or die or whatever other instabilities may be brought to bear. So it's in this context that you now have, the potential, and my insistence has been that the United States was the first successful anti-colonial revolution. That's why the British Empire and every billionaire globalist entity modeled on the British Empire has had to target the identity of the United States, which began, frankly, the instant Franklin Roosevelt died. Truman was brought in. We dropped nuclear bombs on Japan totally unnecessarily. And then you had a real coup in the 60s with the assassination of Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy, the Vietnam War, the rock, drug, sex counterculture, the Green Movement, and we lost our way. So now you can have the spectacle that there is the presidency, which Mr. LaRouche was very much a part of when he was working with Ronald Reagan, and before and after that as a back channel to the Soviet Union on the Strategic Defense Initiative. Our Constitution is based on a presidential system. So that is the target. So we have the very dangerous circumstance that we have an incumbent nominal president who is senile, who cannot function, and frankly has been senile for some time, probably since he got in. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has correctly, pointedly asked, how long has this been going on? Who is responsible for covering it up? And we know there's a very big cover-up, which has involved the media and others doctoring videos to try and hide Biden's paralysis, his freezing at certain moments. And then when people in the room with him released videos of him showing signs of dementia, those were called deep fakes. We have that. And then we have the assassination attempt against the leading presidential candidate, former President Donald Trump, which missed by a fraction of an inch, which clearly was intended to be an assassination. And you have to consider what the intended result was. Would Nikki Haley have become the Republican nominee? Would we have had riots in the street? What would have happened? We had a show in the Congress today of hearings where they quote unquote grilled the head of the Secret Service about the problems, the failures last Saturday. But really, that's not the point. And my sense of the current strategic situation, really, I was struck by this quote from Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. It's a charade. If the Congress were serious, they would have investigated what happened with Nord Stream. That's a big fat plum sitting there. Seymour Hersh, who is notoriously reliable, exposed that it was a group of people. People say, who is running the country right now? Well, why don't we look to that group who agreed that we could blow up a major energy source for Germany, this pipeline, and Biden, being senile, blurted it out at a press conference standing next to Olaf Scholz. So I think we are in an incredible moment of crisis. It is a sick joke that a war criminal, Bibi Netanyahu, is going to be addressing both houses of Congress on Wednesday. This never should have been allowed to occur. It should be stopped now. And it is urgent that the American people rise to action on the level that an American citizen should, not as a subject, not as a slave, not as a sheep. That's it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Diane. We're going to go right to Jose. Go right ahead. Jose Vega, 15th Congressional District candidate for Congress from the Bronx.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to thank, first of all, everyone for being on and getting on. I know this was put on essentially last minute, and a lot of you had just gotten calls either from myself or from some of my staff members. And so, I want to thank you for taking your Monday evening to listen to what we actually have going on. This was organized impromptu because, well, the situation is just unfolding in such a way that everything is happening at a rapid pace, and we need to be able to keep up, respond, and go on the offensive from here. And in that regard, I want to thank Larry Johnson, who I think will follow me, as well as Garland Nixon and Cliff Kirikoff, who will be giving us their view of where things stand. And we want questions. We want to hear from you as much as you would like to hear from this excellent panel that we've assembled here. The chat is currently not on right now, but you can raise your hand to show that you'd like to ask a question. If you want to text something or email something, a written question, you're more than welcome to as well. But raising your hand is the best way so that we know if you have some kind of question or response. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and let us know that you're that you want to say something. But other than that, I just think, look, I'm not going to take much more time here. I think Diane pretty much laid out everything I wanted to say, and I'm sure all of you are eager to listen to the rest of the panel that we have here assembled. But I would just say that now is not the time to be a spectator. I know a lot of you who are on this call were involved in petitioning, whether it was for myself or Diane, and all of you actually decided to come out of the internet and into the reality of the streets and actually get mobile and active. And there are going to be ways in which we can do that, and we will be discussing it right now, given the fact that we don't have real leadership. Biden dropped out not because of political pressure, because he wasn't a good candidate, it's because he can't
You can send them a link.
Diane
Okay.
needs to mute herself.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I will mute her for her. There we go. We don't have real leadership in the country. Biden dropped out because he can't form two coherent sentences, but he's saying he wants to finish out the end of his term. It's absolutely absurd that this guy can continue to serve between now and January when we are on the precipice of World War III. So we are quite literally blindly walking into nuclear annihilation. There are some glimmers of hope, but ultimately it's up to the people on this call to decide that they actually want to do something about it, that they actually want to be mobilized and act and figure out ways in which we are not just spectators, but actively deciding what happens next and not just being carried away by the waves. And so I'll just end it there, Dennis, and we can take this up more in the Q&A and in the discussion. But as people listen to the reports, as people listen to what Garland and Larry and Cliff have to say, raise your hands just so we know what kind of response to expect. So go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jose. We're going first to Larry Johnson, who's been, shall we say, in the forefront of the fight from the Russiagate era, where he and Bill Binney and some other people made a lot of problems for the people that were claiming there was a hack, when in fact there was no Russian hack. The entirety of that drama was a fake. And he's with us here tonight. Some people have been seeing him on Judge Napolitano or other of the various venues that he's spoken on. And so we asked that Larry kind of kick things off, and then he'll be followed by Garland Nixon and Cliff Kirikoff. So, Larry.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Let's be clear. What happened on a week ago Saturday was not an accident, was not simply a catastrophic failure by the Secret Service. It was that. But it wasn't the kind of failure that was precipitated because people just didn't follow basic rules. There was a reason, I believe, that they didn't do a lot of the things, follow their basic standard operating procedures for both doing advance and positioning assets. And then when you add to that the timing of it, 2 days before the Republican National Convention, and the fact that, as I understand it, both CNN and MSNBC showed up to cover the event. I don't remember, I don't watch the Trump rallies, but my understanding is that previous rallies were not covered by them. So there clearly was the expectation that something was going to happen. There's a lot of bad information, bad assumptions out there. Right now, what I am convinced of is that the attempts to describe Crooks as an inept shooter, somebody who he couldn't make his school's rifle team, and he was able to pull off that shot. Well, that just shows people's ignorance, both about trying to shoot an AR-15 platform with a red dot optic, which is not magnified. I went out to the gun range where I'm a member, and I did a test on Sunday with another friend who's a pretty decent rifle shot. And we put ourselves on the clock to see how accurate we could shoot on a 5-second and 3-second timer. It's very difficult. And we were only shooting at 7 yards. At 70 yards. I did score 4 direct hits on the head in 5 seconds. But the spread of those shots was such that if I had moved out to 140 yards, question it. And those that insist that that's an easy shot, they just don't know what they're talking about. So that tells me that Crooks had help, not necessarily at the event, but certainly beforehand. He had help zeroing his rifle. What that means is when you have an optic with a red dot, the way the dot works is when you look through the scope, you'll see the dot, press the trigger, and in theory, the bullet should go where the dot was. But you first have to make sure that that dot is properly aligned with your rifle. And so, as I pointed out in the videos were posted at sonar21.com, my first shots were about 6 inches above the head. And that's because from the last time I shot the rifle when it was 0, in that just the 6 weeks since I did that, it lost the 0. So I had to re-zero the firearm. It is, I would say, virtually impossible that Crooks, went in, grabbed his dad's gun, and then showed up at the event and climbed up on the roof and was able to pull off the first shot, which would have killed Trump. There's additional evidence that's emerged today in terms of tracking cell phones. And there are a lot of very odd coincidences. One that suggests that, in fact, there may have been contact between somebody who is within a block of the FBI headquarters. And so there's a lot that needs to be investigated here. The problem we have is I wouldn't trust the FBI or the Secret Service to conduct any kind of fair evaluation at this point, because frankly, I believe that the upper leadership of those organizations may have had, if not knowledge, may have been involved in this plot. The plot was to kill Trump and to prevent Trump from, and again, I say this not as some Trump fan, but Trump does pose a significant threat to the deep state. There are some videos out with respect to Project 2025. The Trump people learned from their first experience in government that they needed to go in and clean house. They failed that. They also learned that they can't trust a lot of the Republican establishment. And so they're taking steps right now very proactively to make sure that if Trump wins and is still alive, that they'll hit the ground running and they'll be able to do a shakeup of the deep state that frankly has a lot of that entrenched interest terrified. And I think it's correct, not just in this country, but overseas. So I'll stop there and we'll get on to Garland.
Thank you very much, Larry. Let me say to everybody that's getting in, we are now beginning to get people in the queue and so on. And what we want you to make sure is that when you have a question, you get on, please direct it to someone. Don't make it just a general thing, just because there's going to be a lot of other people on the line after you. We're going to try to get through a lot of things tonight. And we're not merely just doing kind of who shot John kind of questions. We also want, hey, here's what I'd like to do in my area. Do you think this is the right thing for me to do? We need to have deployment and organizing. I'll make one plug because Larry just spoke, is that we have executive intelligence review. And one of the things to say is that Larry's writings, other people who have written about these things, circulating these and having a clearinghouse in which these things can be circulated. Our Executive Intelligence Review magazine happens to be a perfect vehicle for that. We did have something that was given to us by the Russian ambassador to the United States, Mr. Antonov, which we put out last week. That's now in circulation, and we will be using our publication as the publication of record. It's going to be very important because there needs to be an independent investigation, as was said by Larry, not left to the FBI or Secret Service or other agencies to investigate themselves. Okay, so Garland Nixon, political commentator and radio talk show host from down in Washington, D.C. His show is Radio Sputnik. He's with us. Garland, take it away.
All right. Well, a couple of things. The most important being, I think we have to take we have to have a positive, some positive takeaways here. And I think there are some positive things. So as people know, I do a show on Radio Sputnik. I also have a radio show on Pacifica, WPFW 89.3 FM, and that's every Friday. I've been doing that for years. And of course, I rant and rave and et cetera. But I've noticed something more and more. Two things that I've noticed. A certain amount of people just throwing in the towel, saying, you know what, the government, I don't trust them anymore. Congress is not going to do anything for you. And, so I noticed more resignation, right? In a negative way. You could look at it that way, but like, they're just not going to do it. These people don't care about us. Okay. One of the things that is transformed into, and I'm struggling with it, and that is, as you know, if somebody listens to a pundit or read your stuff, they think you have the answers. They want answers. And now in that more and more, what I'm getting from people, callers, I take callers every week, is what is the answer? What are we going to do about this? Well, we know something's wrong, but what are we going to do? Now, here's my point. That's a positive thing. That's a very positive thing. What that shows is that people aren't just the brainwashed zombies. Is there a certain element in our society that's still, brainwashed into the system or whatever? Yes. But there are a lot of people that are getting angry and frustrated over what's happening in Gaza and what's happening overseas and what's happening in their personal life, their personal economic struggles. Meanwhile, they have to read, Biden or whoever write something that says the economy's never been better. The economy's great. All is going well. And it angers and frustrates them. So I think that number one, we are seeing the desperation in the system. The fact that they took a swipe at Trump, right? The fact that they're scrambling now to deal with how they're going to replace Joe Biden. There's factional fightings I'm hearing from my people in the on the inside, and I have a few. That there is factional fighting right now, that the Democratic Party is in big trouble because there's a certain element that wants the Hillary Clinton people want Kamala. That's their person. That's their, but Obama doesn't really want her. There are elements that doesn't like Kamala, that doesn't feel that she was. So bottom line is, if they're fighting, they're in chaos. They're in disarray. And since they're in chaos and disarray, and desperate and punching in all directions, that means there's an opportunity for those of us who've been seeing, this issue, who've been seeing this issue for years and have been trying to get more and more people to join into some kind of a movement to change things and to take us back in a direction where, regular old working class people can get a fair break and we can get a government that's honest and looks out for the people. So I think that right now, the desperation of the system, the disarray of the system is an advantage to those who want to make change, who wants to make some reforms, or however you want to state it. And I think the state of mind of the everyday working class people out here is one not just of acceptance, right? They're not just saying, okay, we got a problem and we need to do something about it. It's one of, they're looking for answers. They're frustrated. What can we do? What's wrong? What do we need to do? And I think that's a positive thing. So as bad as dark as things look, my dad was a longshoreman and, in the longshoremen's union, the hard hat wearing kind of guy, and, the old ILA, and they used to have a saying, hard times are fighting times, right? Well, we've got hard times, but we also have got fighting times, and we've got a lot of people out here, regular old people in the street who want to fight, who want to do something different. And I don't mean fight in a negative way. I mean, who want to act, who want some direction, who want some understanding. And I think we're in a good position right now. The system's in disarray. It's falling apart. It's dangerous, but it is in disarray. It's not stable. And the people are saying, what can I do? What we have to do is make sure that we have a clear message. That what I want to be able to do is, when I get those callers every Friday, and somebody inevitably says, Garland, I agree with you, but what do I do? What I need, what all of us need to be able to do, is have a very clear answer when someone says, man, things are so screwed up. What do I do? I'm glad you asked. And we can give them something to do. And we can all direct them to something, whether it's an action, a call to action, websites, things of that nature. That's what we need to do. We meet all of the people who are pushing, who understand the dire situation that we are in. Many of us who've been predicting it for years and saw it coming. We need unified ways that we can direct the people who are frightened, upset, and angry. We can direct them to someplace, to places and things that they can do and actions they can take. So I think that many of us have a vision. We need to be able to articulate it, but I think there's an opportunity now. And we need to be able to capitalize on this opportunity, because here's the bottom line. Because if we don't, If we don't capitalize on it, the system will. They'll reach out and they'll grab them and they'll pull them right back in, and they'll give them somebody to be afraid of. Oh my gosh, Project 2025 is just waiting to get you. You know, oh, Trump is going to get you. Oh, but they're going to give us something to be afraid of. If we don't have direction, if we don't have answers, the system is always going to have lies and fake answers for them. So that's the main thing I think I'm saying is I want to be able to, I'd love to be able, when people say, what do I do, to have a really clear answer that I know is from a unified group of people. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for that, Garland. And we certainly have various suggestions for answers. I want to go to Professor Cliff Kirikov first. Cliff is professor of political science, former senior professional staff member of the United States Senate on Foreign Relations, and also the author of the book Dark Crusade, Christian Zionism and U.S. Foreign Policy. He's the president of the Washington Institute for Peace and Development. Cliff.
Hey, Dennis, thank you. And thank everyone for tuning in, so to speak, and being with us today. It's great to see so many people have joined our discussion, our conversation. The first thing I'd mention is that pick up a little bit on Diane and Dennis. Dennis mentioned the idea that we're citizens. Yes, we are citizens, and we can take action as citizens. We're all citizens of this republic, a representative republic, democratic republic, constitutional republic, and that's who we are. We're Americans. I would say one thing to start: go online, Google George Washington's farewell address, and read it paragraph by paragraph, and see what he was trying to tell us about our republic and how to keep it, and dangers to the republic and challenges, but how we can keep it. So some basic civics education can start with George Washington's farewell address. I'm a foreign policy guy. I worked in the United States Senate for 11 years in Washington, D.C. I served a number of years on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I've also worked, we can say, with various federal government organizations, all in foreign affairs and national security work. You know, in the Senate, Foreign Relations, there's only 100 senators. It's a small place. And I used to see Biden and his staff, a few times a week. This is a number of years ago. But today he's a ghost of what he was, a real ghost, which is something we need to think about, because the President of the United States is in charge of the so-called nuclear codes that can send us into nuclear war with, figuratively speaking, a push of a button and manipulation of some codes. We have, as Diane said, we're facing some international geopolitical issues that are challenging to us and bordering on world war. Ukraine, for example, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, the savage genocide that the Zionist state is carrying out against the Palestinian people. That can also expand. The Ukraine war can expand into a general European war. The Gaza war can expand into a Middle Eastern war. If the Zionist state, and I mean Israel, but I prefer to use the phrase Zionist state, attacks north into Lebanon, well, that can trigger an entire Middle Eastern conflict in the flash of a pan. The reality out there is that Israel is not as strong as it was a decade, 2 decades ago. Hezbollah and some of the freedom movements, resistance movements, are much stronger today. Hezbollah, operating in southern Lebanon, back in 2006, hammered the Israelis when they tried to attack Lebanon, where they live. Hezbollah today has infinitely more weaponry than they did before, and they could really damage all of Israel with the push of a button and their missiles. As for Iran, you hear people like Lindsey Graham and different senators, and you even heard Vance the other day talk about punching Iran, a war with Iran. You know, Iran is about 80 million people. That culture has been around for several thousand years. They're very sophisticated people, and they have very sophisticated technology, particularly weapons technology. And with their missiles, they can actually erase Israel, erase it. And they can also erase all the military bases the United States has in the region with the push of the button. And they demonstrated that once a couple years back, kind of a light touch, but they blew up part of one of our bases and injured some people. So that's the tinderbox out there from Gaza and into Lebanon and Iran and the whole picture in the Middle East. And as was remarked by Diane, Bibi Netanyahu is coming this Wednesday. I think it's important to, one thing we can all do is stay up with the news. That's being a good citizen. Stay up with the news. Keep an eye on Congress. Keep an eye on international events. Be a good citizen. Be aware. Bibi's coming Wednesday. Well, let's look at his speech. Let's look what he says. Let's look at the reactions of various congresspersons to his speech. If we want, we can even watch it live and see the reaction of the people we've elected. And you will find it's a sort of a slavish reaction to this Zionist monster, we can say. At any rate, and I've met Bibi. I've been to Israel. I've been up on the Golan Heights with the Israeli military. I've been briefed by the Israeli military. I've been to Israel on official business. I met Bibi in his office in Israel. He's a very slick guy, very sharp. He knows the United States inside out. He knows how to manipulate American opinion, but particularly he knows how to manipulate senators and congressmen. So you watch on Wednesday. Be a good citizen. Watch on Wednesday, or at least read the newspapers, or listen to commentators like Garland and Larry and such, and get an idea of what is this guy saying and what does it mean to us? Because what it means to us is he wants to drag us into a war in the Middle East. We're already helping him in Gaza, murder a couple 100,000 Palestinians, but he wants to drag our country, our republic, into a major war in the Middle East. Well, that's just not acceptable. So I would say, to conclude right now, I like Garland's positivity. He's absolutely right. I can think back to the 1960s, late 1960s, when I was in college, and we were all anti-Vietnam War activists. And I even remember going up to Columbia University in '68, and they had very famous kind of anti-war activity at that time up at Columbia. And thank God the students are carrying on that tradition today with respect to the Gaza situation. Back then, for us, it was the Vietnam War. But bottom line of the anti-Vietnam War movement, the new MOB, dozens and dozens of anti-war organizations across the United States from the late 60s, demonstrating, taking to the streets, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, which is a great thing. Finally, President Lyndon Johnson had to actually not run for office in the fall of '68. He had to actually say to the American people on a live television broadcast that he was going to remain president to finish out his term, but he wasn't going to try to run for president again. And not again, but run for president. And that was a result of several Democratic Party senators coming to him, telling him that, look, you can't win the election. This Vietnam situation is, dragging you down. Well, that's all because of the anti-war movement, the MOVE, and that was young people, college students, parents, older people, average citizens, working class people, professional people, etc. So I would leave you with the thought that we can unite, and we can get into the streets or whatever, or educate ourselves by reading George Washington's farewell address, or watching the TV, watching the internet for BB speech, etc. But with the Vietnam anti-war movement, we did succeed because President Ford had to get us out in 1975. So that anti-war movement did succeed, and we can succeed again as long as we're united and well informed. That's very important. So listen to Garland's show and Larry and Ray McGovern and some of the pundits that are regularly online. That's it for right now. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Cliff. Let me say to everybody, I want to thank everybody for being with us. Again, the audience is, people are still, the organizing group is still building here. I see that we have at least 10 questions, maybe more. And here's what we ought to do. I realize there's different people who have different schedules. We should continue this. I'm going to offer that we will do it with whomever among our speakers and candidates is able to stay on. I'm saying that because it's so urgent, and some of us at least are going to be able to stay fully. I don't know what the schedule is for each of the speakers. Just wanted to say that quickly before we go to questions. One other thing is, because of this question of what to do, we have independent candidacies. There is Diane Sayre and Jose Vega. You can certainly work with those campaigns. That's one element. And of course, contributing to those campaigns is equally important. Just want to say that so that they don't have to just address that directly. Then there's interventions. That's something that Jose Vega can say something about at some point in the discussion. Independent classes. This is something, of course, that the LaRouche organization has done for years, but these are classes on everything from American history to the tools, the weapons by which you would do interventions, which include music, surprisingly, and geometry and many other things. There's a lot more to say about that. And then independent assemblies, where we are going around and we're touring various parts of American history. Just wanted to reference this. I'm being a bit quick about that, but that's the reason we're doing this, because of time. Now, what we're going to do on the questions is that we're getting stuff in by text message, and we're getting people with their hands up both. That's good. So we're going to get to all the questions, but we ask you to be patient. And when you ask a question, please think in terms of 3 minutes or less. Reason being, there's at least, if we did every question, asking every question, if every questioner takes 3 minutes, that's a half an hour. So just think about it, right? That's not the answers. So, and I'm sure, and there could be more people behind us that are going to get questions because of what you say. That may provoke something in somebody else's mind. So try to be as succinct as possible. And if possible, direct the question to an individual. If somebody else feels they want to answer it, they can, of course, come in, and you may get more people to answer. Okay, so the first person we want to hear from is Evan. Can we unmute him, Jose, and have him speak?
Yes, there you go. Go ahead, Evan.
Hey, how's it going? I want to say, before I ask my question, I'm just very excited about the prospect of an independent candidacy in the Bronx challenging Richie Torres. My first foray into politics was finding Bernie, I would say, via, not because I was into democratic socialism, but just like looking for independents that are operating within the American political system. And so I happened to resonate with a lot of what he was about. Now, LaRoucheite and LaRouche philosophy is something that's a little bit newer to me, but something that I've been curious about, and I'm ready to hit the ground running and really put energy into your campaign, because everything you're saying is resonating with me, and I have a lot of electoral experience. But let's say, you do get elected, right? Like, I'm curious as to how somebody that maintains your viewpoints and that wants to do what you want to do, like I personally, I perceive the American public likely to resonate with it as well. However, I imagine an onslaught of slander. I imagine a lot of negative energy coming your way. And so I'm curious as to how you imagine grappling with the kind of like political media reality of actually attaining office. But I am very much so invested in pushing your ideas forward, as I agree with them.
Jose, it sounds like that's directed to you.
I suppose so. Quite a heavy question to kick off the night.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm sorry, like, cause like it's
Well,
like
it's not so difficult actually because I mean the political pressures of and the slander, it's already there. It's not something
yes,
I'm foreign to already. I mean, and you started the right way by asking, well, you know, the LaRoucheism, you know, you agree with everything I'm saying. This organization that I've been a part of for the last 10 years of my life has been slandered and dragged through the mud. You can't even say the name without somebody freaking out about it.
yeah,
The reason that that's the case is because there was no selling out on the part of the people in the organization or by Lynn himself. And because they stuck through their principles, that is the price you pay for telling the truth. And you know, that's the price I'm willing to pay too. You know, everything that you see from me is what you will, that's what I will be and more from now till the day I die. Whether that's tomorrow or 50 years from now, that's just me, and these are the principles that I am. Um, on the other
that's
side,
great.
you know, I know implicitly the fear is that I would become like a Bernie Sanders or an AOC. And, you know, you tell me if you agree or disagree with that, but I know that that's a fear that a lot of people have, right? Because the first thing people tell me is, well, you better not be like AOC. You better not be like Bernie if you win. Well, the truth is the other side doesn't have anything I want or can provide the things I want. If they can
Yeah,
find a way to join the United States to BRICS, well, then maybe that's what I would like, you know, or putting an end to the genocide. But they don't want that, nor do they have that. And so, but the reality of it is too that a lot of this is not just on my shoulders. I mean, I come from a long line of people who are just are so
mhm.
experienced in taking the slander and moving along that they just, you know, it's nothing to them. But ultimately, the important part is the fact that I have intervened and that I have shown that I am willing to stand up and tell the truth no matter where I am. And that the reactions that I've gotten from it, for example, this last intervention that I did, you know, some people may be familiar with it here, where I stood up at the Asia
Asian
Society,
Council, yeah,
yeah, right, against Matthew Pottinger. What was the reaction of my friends and I standing up against that? 100 million views. A lot of that from China, a lot of that
hell
from
yeah,
Brazil, a lot of that from French-speaking countries, you know, because it was translated into French, Spanish, Chinese, Portuguese, and another language I'm forgetting, and probably more too. The world is with me. And also because
yeah,
I don't place my identity in the context of the now. I and the present. Am I doing enough for some child who's going to be born 50 years after I'm dead? And will they have a better life than me? That's the way in which I judge my life and my identity. I struggle with it, but that's me. And that's the principle at which I've decided to take my life upon. And that I think is something everybody should do as well. And so, you know, you can ask me all kinds of questions you like, and I'd be happy to answer it. I think people should be asking themselves, what are they going to do as well? And if your answer is you want to help me get into office and help me get into the Congress, then yeah, let's do it. Let's move full force and mobilize to get this thing done.
yeah. That's a perfect answer in my opinion. Yeah,
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just going to move to the next person. And again, that was fine. The exchange is good. This next person is Michael. Everybody just remember, we're getting a lot of other people that on asking questions, and we are going to try to do those questions. By the way, before you start, Michael, Diane, we heard you didn't sound too good there. So if you want to jump in here at some point, let us know. Okay, Michael.
Hey, Jose, this question is for you. It's good to see you again here via Zoom. Just would like to say it was a good time coming out there to the Bronx a few months ago with me and Kevin here, all the way from Ohio. I'm personally, to everybody here in the chat, also running as an independent candidate for Congress, and I traveled out to the Bronx to help Jose get signatures to get on the ballot because I feel it's very important to help other independent candidates, turn the tide in this country. And I'd like to, for my question, refer to what Garland asked, is that what can we do? In my opinion, working class people, whoever people get involved in politics, I firmly believe that an independent coalition of candidates to exert power in Congress is something that people can get behind and can be a spoke in the wheel. As we saw, there was razor thin margins recently with the government spying powers in the FISA warrants that went down to 1 vote in the House. With just a small coalition of independent candidates, a couple, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think we could hold a tremendous sway. We saw what happened with Force the Vote down to 5 votes in the squad in 2021, and they could have removed Nancy Pelosi from power. So I feel that forming coalitions, running for office as a spoke in the wheel is something that, can be done. Dennis Kucinich is running, you're running, RFK. It seems like the trend in American politics is going towards independence. And so anyway, Jose, I just like to say, hey, what's up again? And, congratulations on everything you're doing, and essentially your thoughts on coalition building and, giving voters like something excited to, vote for.
Sure. Thank you. And it's good to see you too and hear from you, Michael. I'm sorry I dropped the ball in keeping up with you, man, but I promise we will talk. I will.
Oh, you're fine, man. We're all busy.
I would just say, yeah, I mean, absolutely. A coalition of candidates in Congress, or congressional members of, Congress who are building this coalition, a freedom caucus, or the squad that actually had a backbone. I'm all for it. Now, this is gonna sound a little funny coming from me because I'm a candidate, and I don't think Diane would disagree, but how do we get to a point where we can actually start talking about a viable candidate coalition if right now, between now and next week, we have no idea what's going to happen, or between now and even to the ballot box?
True.
And so I've been calling for an independent movement of voices, which some of it, of course, manifests into an independent candidates movement. I mean, of course, I'm running as an independent, you're an independent, Diane's an independent, and we got other independents running as well. But independent voices, like people who just stand up and intervene, who aren't running for anything, who can have the effect because of their intervention to reach millions and millions of people, sometimes even billions of people around the planet, if it's probably really good enough to do that, that can actually change the world, that can actually bring about some kind of lasting effect or change. And it may not be an immediate kind of change, but it does change the dynamic and increases attention going on around the country and around people's minds of this Socratic tension that Dr. King spoke of. That's what we're trying to do. So right now, as Dennis laid out in the beginning, everyone's running paralyzed and afraid of what's going on. And I think, getting behind candidates right now is definitely one of the easy ways to be mobilized and vehicled into a movement. Of course, people can help you, they can help me, they can help Diane. And then there are things that people who may not want to be involved in a campaign should be doing as well, in ways in which that they can express it. And I don't want to take up too much time. I feel like I'm talking a lot. So if anybody else.
Keep it up, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, I'll just broaden that question and I'll put it in the air as we continue. This will be particularly for Cliff and for Larry, because one of the things that Scott Ritter brought up, also Diane may want to speak to it since Scott is one of the people that brought it up, an independent investigative committee on the assassination attempt against Trump. And I'd say more broadly on the Assassination Bureau, because we know we have another candidate running whose father was assassinated when he ran for president, Robert Kennedy Jr., who just got Secret Service protection. We don't know if that's so good. So there's that other question that sort of is hanging there in the air. We're going to go to the next person just to keep the thing moving, but I invite Garland and
Diane's waving hand.
Diane's
Yeah,
had.
can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
Just in terms of what people can do and what I said, I really also want to come back to the bankruptcy of the system because it's the driver. I heard rumors today of Trump talking about Jamie Dimon, who's one of the main crook beneficiary clients of Jeffrey Epstein, of this blowout. And one of the things we really have to stop doing is presuming that because someone figured out how to play the system and make a lot of money, like Dimon or others, that they know anything about economics. We really have to put the system through an orderly bankruptcy reorganization. It's going to crash. And either it's going to be total chaos if we don't have a nuclear war first, or you're going to get people who reorganize the thing in the way that FDR did when he shut down the banks for 4 days, and you sort out what's legitimate debt and what's garbage, and you write off a ton of crap that is unpayable, that will never be paid. You put the Federal Reserve through bankruptcy reorganization, create a national bank, and create an economic system that can actually increase the productive power of the American people. Because if you increase our productivity, you will increase the purchasing power of the dollar by even an order of magnitude. And somehow there's enormous fear and squeamishness, because if you talk about the system crashing, well, you're going to cause it, blah, blah, blah. It really has to be on our minds that this thing is not long for this world. That's why the desperation. That's it.
Okay, let's go to Greg Witherspoon. Can you unmute him? Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, well, good afternoon. And thank you all for this opportunity. One thing that along with what Garland was saying, I think we are at this kind of fundamental point of clarity. So how do we spread this clarity or this freedom to the nation? Obviously, just like Diane had a discussion about understanding economics, but how do we get the American people to do that? We've got 3 generations of American people who don't have any clue of what economics really is. And so there is a great hesitation when it comes to talking about economics. So I think going along the lines of having some type of regional or area cadre schools, again, all of these things I think have to be working simultaneously in order for us to create the kind of sustainability we want in this moment of chaos. Again, I think it'll bring a great clarity to that. And so how does anybody on the panel have suggestions about how we can begin to actually educate the American people so that they get to understand exactly what it is we're talking about when we're talking about the American system of political economy?
Yeah, I'm going to ask that Cliff answer that, and I'll just ask again, Diane, because I hear you. I don't know how long you'll be able to stay with us if you also have an answer to that. But let's ask Cliff, because he actually referenced something about that. Cliff?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and let me put my face in there. There we are. Yeah, well, back in the anti-Vietnam War days, we also had teach-ins at universities. So I know the kids, students today have done fantastic things on college campuses, university campuses, with respect to the Gaza situation. And I think the same type of actions, teach-ins, workshops, et cetera, are a way to go in this. Jamie Dimon's name was brought up. What we do need to focus on, and I think in the back of people's minds, they do realize that Wall Street, is kind of a nefarious place. Those rich cosmopolitan bankers and that kind of a thing. And so it's Wall Street versus Main Street. All of us on Main Street, working class people, professional people, whatever, students, we're Main Street. And Wall Street wants us to be basically slaves. And so I think casting it in terms of Wall Street versus Main Street, the American people. And also, we should introduce, and it's not easy to do, but step by step, we should introduce the idea that, well, it's not just Wall Street in New York, it's also London, the City of London, which is their version of Wall Street. The City of London is their version of, that's the British Wall Street. And the two work together and promote finance capitalism. And that in turn creates pressures for an imperialist foreign policy. So you kind of notice that, for example, the British and the Americans are behind the Ukraine war. The British and the Americans are behind the Gaza massacres and genocide of the Zionist state. So I think when we're looking at economics, I would like to, there's a lot of theory out there, which is important to know. Lynn LaRouche was taught that, but also Lynn and others were concerned about economic history. And, you know, what have these international bankers been up to? I mean, for example, 1837 in the United States, who comes over to the United States as a banker? A guy by the name of Auguste Belmont, Schoenberg. Who is Auguste Belmont? He was the financial agent representative of the Rothschild interests in Europe. That's who Auguste Belmont was. And what happened to Auguste Belmont? Very successful banker. And gosh, by the 1860s, he was chairman of the Democratic Political Party, a Rothschild banker, right? So today, who do we have that's similar? Oh, George Soros. He's a Rothschild guy out of the Swiss Rothschild network in Geneva. And Jamie Dimon's name was mentioned as a banker, et cetera, et cetera. So aside from the theory that Lynn has developed in his day, theory, American system theory, that was mentioned earlier. That goes back to the 1830s in the United States. Henry Clay, for example, the American system. The American economist way back then, whose name was Henry Carey, C-A-R-E-Y, Carey, Henry Charles Carey, who was an American economist with the American system. So we do have in the United States our own history, our own tradition of the American system from way back in the 1830s and so on, all the way through the 19th century, by the way. So on the aspect of theory, we have a great tradition. And then on the aspect of, well, what's really going on in economic history? Well, we can look at history and look at the contemporary world. I'll end by saying that, of course, as we know, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and many think he was assassinated because he wanted to have an independent currency, the greenback dollar, rather than be wedded to influences by London, in the City of London. So he was murdered because he wanted to print the greenback and free us from the globalists, we can say, of that day. That's a quick answer. We could talk about this for hours.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot for that, Cliff. So I'm going to announce the next two questioners, but then I want to go to Larry Johnson because I want to make sure we get an answer on that business about the investigative committee, what it was that Scott Ritter brought up. So the next we'll be going to Ashley and then to Nissan. But Larry, if you could say something about this idea, which Scott Ritter brought up, about an independent investigative committee because you can't trust the Secret Service or the FBI to investigate themselves.
Yeah, the experience over the last 8 years with the FBI have demonstrated that they fabricate evidence, that they bury evidence. The Hunter Biden laptop is a case in point. They made sure that that never saw the light of day, even though that could have been decisive in the 2020 election. The same thing with the entire the collaboration with the CIA in producing the false narrative that Russia was trying to, quote, interfere in our election. I mean, and really the hypocrisy of that is just staggering when you look at all the different countries where the United States has intervened, overthrown, manufactured, and even to this day through things like National Endowment for Democracy, et cetera. Secret Service as well is compromised. Just the fact that they failed to just do the very basic things that are required, that when you do in advance, that you have a command post, and that you have integrated communications, and that you properly brief local law enforcement, and you have communications with them. They shouldn't be anywhere near the investigation. So there are people outside that can be brought in, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, very good. So let's go to Ashley. Can we unmute her?
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, the main question that I had would be primarily directed to Jose and Diane. Given the recent events that are currently showing this trajectory that the elections are not going to be free, most likely, or there's going to be some sort of undemocratic rigging of the elections. How has that impacted the overall strategy for y'all's elections in terms of gathering people to still have faith in this system?
Diane, going to say something?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because I was just thinking about it. And as people, I mean, at the moment, I would say there's no evidence that we are going to have a free and fair election. Nothing has been done to change the mess of 2020. But it's not that people aren't trying. So I think we have to fight for that. I'm absolutely not, and would never advocate that people not vote. I would simply say that voting is not enough. And it's not the case that nothing registers. Look at the uncommitted vote, or look at even what happened in New York. They tried to cover it up, but there was a quote unquote what they call a blank vote, which I won't go into here. But in the Democratic presidential primary, the blank vote was between 12 and 13%, which is actually huge. So I think, one, we have to say that there is election fraud, because there is, and it's massive. But two, it also can be overcome. And three, that's why you have to be visible in the streets and outspoken and not fearful. And maybe I should be less spoken, so I'll get my voice back.
Okay, very good. Jose, you want to say anything about it? If not, I would be very happy to say something about that.
Go ahead.
I'm not meaning that prompt. I'm saying seriously. Listen, people, there's something we all have to understand. Last week, as Scott Ritter put it, the reason that Trump was almost killed was because every other way of stopping him from being a candidate had failed. The directive as to where that came from, we don't know, but it could very well have come from NATO. NATO was meeting. Doesn't mean that they had to make the directive at the meeting, but they were meeting in Washington. The idea should not be assumed that if Trump had been killed, that Biden would still not have been removed, because that would have been perfect. Because the thing that a lot of people don't consider is that the target of NATO is the primary target of NATO is the United States presidency. See, people get sucked into this idea about American imperialism and big bad America, and America's doing everything. That is stupid. That is not true. America is not the source of the evil. What is the source of the evil is Wall Street, which is not America, and the City of London. Now, what we mean by that is that this is a cabal. It's a financial cabal, but it has extraordinary power of one type, financial power. And one thing you can say is that there are no elections presently happening in the United States as of now, not in November, as of now. And that's what just happened. I mean, think about it. Biden, people, at least somebody voted for him. Trump, of course, was about to eliminate it and all the people that voted for him. So that was going to be eliminated. So what has been happening is that the so-called elite has decided they don't care about even trying to give the semblance of, or facade of, or veneer of, or cover of democracy. They said, hell with that. They just use the word, but they don't care what you think about it. That's what they're doing. Here's the problem. That message would lead to anarchy. That message, if it were the only message that were out there, would lead to violence. What we've got to do is have these independent candidacies that are advocating what people acting now. That's the whole point about the interventions and the other things. I just wanted to say that because I think it's relevant, because it's right now that all of this is actually taking place. We have to be clear about that. It's not November. November may literally not come, because you always have to consider the implications in terms of how this is affecting other countries. And that's how this thing, the whole theater is way different than it appears. I think it was Nissan who was the next one, Jose, is that right?
Yes, and then Joshua.
Okay, great, fine. You want to unmute?
Yes.
No camera either? Okay, but greetings, my fellow humans, and thank you for all being here. My name is Nissan, and I'm with the campaign manager for the Derby 2024 Presidential Independent Campaign. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for the independents here that I'm running, and I'm also here representing Human First America. And my question to you guys, well, to go back on what my friend Vega talked about and what Nixon talked about, is like, what are we going to do? What can you do? And what are the solutions? And we at Human First have a solution. And the idea is that we need that coalition. And what are you? And we want to build. We're building that coalition today. So will you be? Imagine the power we all have. We just worked as a collective. Share if all the political campaigns came together, right, under one banner and all did debates. How powerful would that? How powerful would it be if all our small organizations came together, if giving their resources from their media to their endorsements to their writings. I mean, right now I have a series of different groups, and in terms of media, we're taking over a WBAI radio station. So I want to know, are you guys, do you believe it's strong? We are better come and unite together, or do you think it will be better if we keep going to try to collect resources in independent actions? Did that question come through, or didn't?
No, we heard you. I don't know whether that sounds like one of the candidates would have to take that. So
yeah, Nixon. I was hoping Jose would jump in, or Nixon would like to talk about it.
Garland is not on at the moment. Yeah, to get
Garland.
Yeah, look, I think, well, first of all, small coalitions working together, sure, absolutely. I think people should think about, given the urgency of the situation, what was said in the beginning, that we need to act between now and tomorrow, now and next week. I mean, as much as we would like to think about the elections, and of course they're important, we're candidates. I don't even know if we will make it to the election season. I don't know if we're going to make it to November, whether that's we actually don't have elections or there's some state of martial law that's imposed. I think, and if Diane wanted to say something more, I know a lot of the people in the organization were involved a month before 9/11, handing out flyers that said, don't let there be another don't prevent the next Reichstag fire, or something to that effect. And then 9/11 happened. So we're in that kind of situation right now, where the desperation to cling on to some semblance of authority or power is so strong that we are looking at the possibility of another terrorist attack to implement something of that caliber. And I think people really need to start thinking seriously about what to do about that. And I don't personally think that elections are enough to actually solve that. So that's I think people need to start thinking about what their small coalitions, which are not so small, can actually start doing. So that's my response.
Okay, so the next question is from Joshua, is that right?
Yes. I just asked him to unmute.
All right, yep, there you go. So hello, I'm Josh. This question is for Jose. But I'm just going to preface this a little bit. I am personally anarchist adjacent. So I do apologize when I say I'm somewhat unappreciative of the flagrant use of the word anarchy, or rather misuse of the word anarchy. But anyway, I'm of the belief that the history of states is the history of oppression. There is not much that you can really say to convince me of that otherwise, especially the more research I do on history, the more research I do on history, the more I am solid on that conclusion. So my two questions are: how is it that any involvement in the electoral process is going to solve any of the or rather answer any of the people's questions when electoral politics has been like the bane of both people's movements and the people in general throughout history? And the second, which is unrelated to that question, is considering all that is happening and the fact that Marxists and nationalists are going to surround the Capitol on Wednesday to demand the arrest of Netanyahu if they don't just storm the Capitol straight up. How does that end up impacting your current situation?
What we're going to do, we'll answer that question, but before we do that, I know Larry has a limited schedule. We have a question for him. I want to make sure I get into him, and then we'll come back to that. Larry, because of your, okay, this is sort of a combination of questions that have been coming in, but the idea is that because of what you did around Russiagate, you might have to say something to people here so they know what it was, and what you've watched concerning not merely the Democratic Party, but the so-called deep state, meaning intelligence agencies and so on, do around the presidency. How do you view the danger to, for example, the independent candidate RFK Jr.? Do you also think that there are going to be other assassination threats? I understand now I'm getting a message that somebody else has a question for you, but let's go with this question because I know you, since you're still there. What do you view to be at this point the threat level for people like RFK or others?
Well, first, let me note that both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden Biden's announced he's not going to meet with Netanyahu, and Harris is saying she's not going to attend the speech. So they're already they're playing that particular political card. The one threat I see out there now would be multiple drone attack. That's one thing the Secret Service really is not set up to defeat. To my knowledge, they do not have an advanced electronic warfare capability to disable that. We had some real irony a couple of days back when CrowdStrike, through its error, shut down airlines, hospitals, pharmacies, a variety of things, because they were a major player in Russiagate. It was the head of CrowdStrike, the creator or owner, Alperovich, who back in 2016 gave two different interviews, told sort of two minor different stories. But the bottom line was either in late April or early May, CrowdStrike was alerted that the Russians had penetrated the DNC. They went into the DNC and they identified these Russians. That was their story after June 10th. And so from May 2nd until June 10th, CrowdStrike didn't do a damn thing to shut down the servers. Why is that relevant? because the emails that were taken, I believe, by Seth Rich were taken on the 26th of May. And it was not until almost 2 weeks later that CrowdStrike took action to shut down those servers. During that 2 week period, I'm strongly convinced that the CIA, using Vault 7 material that was exposed later by WikiLeaks, created a mythical character called Guccifer 2.0 that came out and took credit for filching the emails. And it was so in the metadata in the Guccifer 2.0 postings, the metadata contained the name Felix Dzerzhinsky. And those who don't know who Felix Dzerzhinsky was, he was the first head of the NKVD under Lenin, the secret police in the newly formed Soviet Union. That's one way that you put a fingerprint on it, but it's it's so obvious and it's so ham-handed that no decent Russian cybersecurity operation would do something so abjectly stupid. But I cannot say the same for the CIA. They have had numerous examples of being abjectly stupid. So the deep state, both the intelligence community, particularly the CIA, FBI, Secret Service, they're all compromised, and they've all become politicized to the point that they're serving only particular political agendas. So I do not rule out that there will not be additional attempts to try to kill Trump. I could see, for example, a drone attack on one of his aircraft, a plane he's flying, coming in for a landing. All you got to do is fly a drone into the engines, just like a bird. It could potentially cause a catastrophe. So it's I don't think this is over, but we're going to be seeing a time of great political chaos, because despite the initial show of force behind Kamala Harris, there's some behind the scenes fighting going on, and they're not going to give up because the group that wants to prevail, they don't trust Kamala.
Okay, very good. Okay, so Jose, you want to answer the other question that was asked before?
Yeah, sure. Just what do we actually expect out of the electoral system? Well, for one, we were given a government, and it's not acting efficiently right now. It's actually been hijacked. And I think we can take back our government because we need a government. We don't have a government. It's something that has been stolen from the American people, and we need to emulate what a government should be. And thankfully, the first line of defense is the citizenry, which is what we are here to talk about now. And some of that requires some people to run as independent candidates, and some of that requires people to just stand up and speak the truth. Because, let's say I were to win the seat, sure, I wouldn't be put on any committees. I probably wouldn't be able to get any policies passed. But like Claire Daly and Mick Wallace, I could tell the truth in there and they cannot ignore it. I can read things into the congressional record. I would actually have a voice, a platform. If myself or Michael or Diane were to actually get in and elected into the office that we seek, what that does is that allows us to be a voice of reason in the government. And, so that the world can see that not all Americans are actually insane or crazy and actually want to work with other countries. So that's my immediate response there.
Okay, now you're going to have to let me, I see a couple of things on the question side. Let me just make an advertisement here, because obviously we're at 10. We'll continue, because obviously some people will have to get going, etc. So let's say a couple of things. First of all, the Executive Intelligence Review is something that everybody should have. You are not going to be able to get anywhere else what we have there. It's not information. It's an evaluation. That's where the problem is. People, the more information, for example, you're getting about this, what happened last Saturday, the less you know. I guarantee you that the detail that you will be flooded with over the next several weeks is simply going to confuse the hell out of you, because that's what it's for. The cover-up operation is on, and virtually everyone is involved, even though they don't know it. Because the whole point of the thing is to not ask the question, who would have become the candidate were Trump to have been killed? Who was that? Because this was being done on behalf of promoting something else. So you can see that's the kind of thing, right? So everybody's looking over here about who the shooter is and who he was working with and all that other stuff. Whereas what's not being thought about is, well, wait a minute, what was supposed to happen after? Executive intelligence review raises those kinds of questions and gives you an historical context. Second element, just as an example, Trump, in an interview he gave with Bloomberg, talked extensively about William McKinley, President William McKinley. Only one journalist really picked up on that, who was Alexander McCourse, who understood immediately what that meant. And what he said about it, which was right, is that if Trump tries to implement policies based on William McKinley, what he would be saying he would be doing is reversing the policies of the last 40 to 50 years. Now, McCourse then said that doesn't mean that Trump's going to do it, but he's discussing something that would mean that. That's what it would imply. Does that have a role in why people tried to assassinate him? Executive intelligence review would tell you about that. And people like Professor Cliff Kirikov, you've heard already, who's been known us for a long time, that's what that publication has in it. We urgently request that you subscribe to that publication. That's one. Secondly, of course, they're the campaigns. The campaigns need money. I'm not going to say more about it. You heard the candidates. It's obvious why they need money. It's also obvious from the standpoint of everything that we do. So just wanted to say that about it. And if you want to contact the candidates with respect to that, that might be something that could be done immediately after this phone call or tomorrow. Now I've lost track to, I see Diane's putting something in about EIR in the chat, which is good.
Yeah, in the queue we had Maria, who had a question for Larry. I hope, Larry, you're still on. And then we have John Mudd and then Roman in the queue.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Larry, fine. So let's go to Maria then, if we've still got a question.
Okay, go ahead, Maria.
Okay, great. Yeah, just in terms of an independent investigation, Larry, do you think that what Senator Ron Johnson is doing could actually produce some serious results? I did get a chance to look at, oh, sorry, I just had a few questions for you. Just his 13-page report that just came out, some of what he has in there conflicts with Kimberly Cheadle's response today, which of course we don't trust anyway. But some of his sources are the local law enforcement. I mean, some of his reports are that the Secret Service didn't show up for a security briefing that morning. So, you know, is the local law enforcement going to be trustworthy in, you know, getting some reports if he's not going to be able to get any answers from, you know, the head of the Secret Service and whatnot? He also mentioned something about the ATF, the Bureau of the ATF. I don't know if there's any significance or what that significance would be. And then my second main question is, you said that Trump would hit the ground running if he makes it and if he becomes president. He does surround himself with very interesting people like Tucker Carlson, but he also surrounds himself with people like Mike Pompeo. So I was just wondering what makes you say that, I mean, it's very hopeful, you know, it'd be great if he does, but, you know, what makes you say that he will actually hit the ground running if he were to become president again? Thanks.
Okay, let me answer your last question first. I based that only on there's a video of the New York City Young Republicans Club within the last year. One of the individuals involved with that is part of the Heritage Foundation's 2025 project. He was involved with personnel management in the first Trump administration. He was very young, and he learned a lot of hard lessons. He talks about very candidly things that they should have done, things that they didn't do. But in his conversation, he recognized that people like Mike Pompeo are not to be trusted. So what the Project 2025 is doing is lining up people that will support Trump's agenda as far as not getting embroiled in never-ending wars, which I welcome and embrace that. Trump has come out and denied any ties to 2025, and frankly, he's lying, but I call it a political lie because it's designed to keep them out of having to battle and defend that on a daily basis. But the work on that's going forward. It's going forward in a very organized, high-level fashion. So that's why I think if they follow the 2025 prep, yeah, I think they've hit the ground running. And I do know from a friend of mine who had a conversation with Trump in December of 2020, because my friend had talked to him. He was a high-level intelligence official who had warned Trump back in 2016, as he's getting ready to take office, that he needed to clean house. And Donald Trump at the time thought his personality would be enough to overcome those obstacles. He learned the hard way that nope, his personality could not win the day. And so I think he now recognizes he's got to take a different approach. I welcome investigations done by Senator Ron Johnson, but what I'm talking about is an official, soup to nuts investigation. You've got to interview people. You've got to collect all of the witness statements. You have to run the ballistic on determine the precise locations where everybody was shot. Right now, there are a couple of different videos out there suggesting, there's one suggesting that there's a second shooter, and yet the line of fire they show wasn't even anywhere near Trump. And so you come back to it and say, if you're going to have a second shooter, what's the purpose of a second shooter? Well, if you're going to try to assassinate Donald Trump, you want to have two shooters that can take him out. And if there was a second shooter, why weren't they continue to fire into that pile of Secret Service agents? They didn't do that. So there are a lot of whistleblowers among the ranks of the Secret Service agents. I know that I have a friend who I interviewed the other day. Larry Cunningham, I mentioned him earlier. Yeah, his phone's been ringing off the hook from active duty agents calling them up. So they know the story. They know what's going on. And it needs to be assembled. The problem is right now that there is no trust left in the FBI or the Secret Service for that matter. So no matter what they come up with, it's not going to be accepted. And this shows really, I think it's a deliberate political tactic by the Biden administration, because if they were really wanting to get to the heart of this matter, they would want to make sure that there was something independent and credible so that the public would believe it. So I think Johnson's efforts are positive, but it really needs to be an independent authority. Maybe the U.S. Marshals, they could head it up. They've got some credibility, but it needs to be taken out of the FBI, out of the Department of Justice, and out of Homeland Security.
Okay, what we're going to do is we've got about 6 more people that we have to have their hands up, and we're going to make sure we do those questions. I'm going to announce the rough order of that now so that they all know it. And if somebody else has something, we'll try to take it, but certainly, that's going to take us to the next 20. We've got 22 minutes till 10:30. We're sort of going to converge on that time. So we're going to take John first, then Ken Freeland, then Monty, then DeRotha Ann, then Roman, and then Gary. Okay. So I'll do that about John's first, Ken, then Monty, then DeRotha Ann, then Roman, and then Gary. Okay. So John.
Okay, there you go. You should be able to unmute now, John.
Okay, yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just got a message from Larry that he's going to have to get off in only 5 minutes. So Larry, maybe you want to say, excuse me about that, John. If you had something you'd like to say in closing, Larry, that way we don't have to, have you, get off without any concluding remarks.
I have a question for Larry.
Sure. Well, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I had a comment and question. Suggestion. Larry, You say that I've heard from Dennis about the political party being disarray. But CIA, I think, works pretty much for the corporations. Are they still on track? I mean, are they and you feel like they're in disarray? I mean, if they're still on track, I mean, what's it matter if the political party is in disarray? They're doing what they've set out to, or what they've always set out to do. Isn't that where the battle
Well,
is?
yeah, actually, I don't. The CIA is and can be a nefarious organization. The one thing people need to understand is let's take it beyond the CIA. The number and Cheadle, this current head of the Secret Service, she is a case in point. She apparently was at Secret Service. She had a small, a career at Secret Service, but she wasn't doing a lot of agent protection. She gets out and goes to work for Pepsi-Cola Corporation. I guess she was in charge of the Frito-Lay division for security. And if you've ever been to any of these security conferences, it's actually pretty funny because what you'll see is in one corner, you'll see a clump of former Secret Service agents interacting back and forth because they all work for a lot of these major corporations. I know, for example, two of my friends from back in my day, one was a security director for Northwest Airlines and one was a security director for United Airlines. Then in a different corner, you'll have a group of former CIA, basically case officers primarily, the ones who go out and recruit spies. They're working for the corporations. Then in a different corner, you'll have the FBI. So this revolving door between the intelligence and law enforcement organizations and these corporations means that the corporations do have a lot of doors they can go through to get back into government to influence it. So sometimes it's not so much that I don't want you to leave with the impression that the CIA is calling the shots. More often than not, the CIA is going to be seeing what it can do to help some of these corporations, because if they're nearing retirement, they make sure that they're going to have a nice, sweet job to walk into.
Okay, Larry, anything else you want to say before you get going?
No, that's it, my friend. I just appreciate you pulling this group together and wish everybody well and to continue to stay informed.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Larry. We'll be in touch shortly, and I want to thank you for the work you're trying to do. Thanks a lot. So long. Okay, let's go to Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Two things. First of all, to Diane, thank you for the sweeping and comprehensive tour de horizon that you gave us at the beginning of the podcast. But I take exception to your claim that the performance of the Secret Service is beside the point. I think when you have a situation where the mainstream media is even concluding that 9 minutes before the shots were fired and before Trump took the stage, that the Secret Service was aware that there was a shooter on the roof, suggests something beyond dereliction of duty here. That we're looking at a very serious complicity, and I think that cannot be swept aside. Just wanted to say that before I get to my second point. I may have misunderstood the meaning of the purpose of tonight's call. I thought it was in part a response to Helga's call for forming a council of reason. Maybe I'm mistaken in that, but I do want to say that I think the formation of a think tank that could respond in real time to events and make policy formulations that could be a unifying factor for the independent candidacies and so forth is something that we need to move forward with very quickly, because the neocons are very well organized and they have their think tanks and all the other spokespeople for the military industrial complex, and we are unorganized in that respect. We don't have a contrarian institute to offer policy options. And I think the depth of the understanding here among us in foreign policy and economics and ways to relieve our current crisis is something that should be formulated and put out to the public and form as a unifying center for our movement going forward. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Is Cliff Kirikoff still on?
It looks like he
Yeah,
is.
I'm here.
You're
Want me
okay,
to-
fine. Very, very good. Cliff, you and I are going to actually take the prerogative of my moderating to answer this question, because I want to just say a couple things to people. I completely disagree with what was just said concerning the question of who's organized and who's not. I totally, thoroughly disagree. Now, this is the popular viewpoint of most Americans, and it may be the viewpoint of most of the people on this call. And with that, I totally, thoroughly disagree. Lyndon LaRouche organized an organization that 50 years ago put together what was then called 10 years later, the best private intelligence agency in the world. The reason was not our access to information. The reason was our ability to analyze what was happening. The people that you're talking about are not well organized. They are severely disorganized. The reason that they are is because they are arrogant as hell. They think they know what they're doing and they don't. And people like Xi Jinping and his security apparatus and Vladimir Putin and his security apparatus know this very well. That's why they screwed up everything in Ukraine. Totally. That's why they've actually also screwed up in Gaza. Sure, Netanyahu is a problem, but the reason he's actually a problem is because he's a Nietzschean. He intends to eliminate everyone, and that includes Israel. And what people don't get is that what we have entered is a different realm. We're not in rationality. You guys are thinking about the idea they have this intricate thing in this organization, that organization, and the big bad thing, and then government is the problem, government's the problem. Well, where are we? What are we? Just little guys that have a little bit of some view of the big bad people, or do we have powers that we can actually move and deploy? Now, that's what was shown in the last 2 years in particular by not merely Jose Vega, but Jose Vega and the people that joined with him. The interventions. Diane did several of these interventions. Let me give you an example. You want to be able to do something that throws the entire situation that these people are operating right now off? All we would need, listen to me carefully, we don't need more than 25 or 30 people. A couple hundred would be a lot better, but don't mean more than 25 or 30 people all just going into various meetings saying the United States should leave NATO. Let me repeat this to you. All you got to do is go into a series of meetings, Council of Foreign Relations kinds of meetings and other things at campuses, and start saying U.S. out of NATO. And you will cause something to happen that will be so decisive that will freak you out. Will freak you out how powerful that is. Because the issue is that what is acting right now is NATO and the people that run that apparatus. It isn't coming from the United States. It isn't coming from the CIA. It isn't coming from the Secret Service. It isn't coming from the DIA. It's mediated through these things. That's why you'll see footprints of these things, but that's not how this thing works. And NATO cannot defeat the Russians or the Chinese, and they certainly can't defeat the Russians and the Chinese. All they've got is nuclear weapons. They've got to go to nuclear war. This is, however, not conceivable by most people because most people think nuclear war is so ultimate, nobody ever thinks about it. These people have thought about it. They intend to go to it. And so what we can do is if we raise this issue, U.S. out of NATO, all of a sudden what will happen is that we'll be talking about the real game, not the game that you're looking at. So I wanted to say this because people say, well, what was the purpose of the call tonight? The purpose of the call tonight is for you to become that committee, that Council of Reason, not for us to talk about organizing it. We have people that we also will be talking about, sure. But the real issue is that the American people are asleep at the switch right now, watching this thing like it's a tennis match and trying to come up with who the next person is or whatever. What's the next clue? We're better than that. And we are better organized than they are on this point, in this way, at this moment. That's not going to last for that long, but it is why we wanted everybody to convene. Our candidacies of Diane Sare and Jose Vega, combined with what we're doing internationally and the problem of these people, gives us something which, if we move now, we will have an advantage. And Cliff, I wanted you to say something about that. Diane may also have something. We will get the other questions, but I thought it's important to intervene since that got raised. Cliff?
Yeah, well, I would just point out again, we're a republic, 350 million fellow citizens here. And we have to think about how this republic can maintain its constitutional order, government, and we can retain our Bill of Rights in a situation where, as has been described, we have very powerful globalist forces trying to intervene in our own republic to quash our freedoms as established by the Constitution. The quick thing I'm going to say is that here in the United States, we have an oligarchy. The deep state serves that oligarchy. That oligarchy, in turn, is part of a transatlantic oligarchy involving Europe, Europeans, and NATO is the war machine for that oligarchy. The deep state services that oligarchy, and that oligarchy is subservient to a plutocracy of the super rich, the super billionaires. And that plutocracy is playing games now with the Democratic Party, kind of moving people in and out of the presidency. So we need to get the big picture that Dennis was trying to get at, and Diane was talking about, this global picture of our republic. We are striving to keep our freedoms under constitutional order, yet we are under attack by not only our own deep state and oligarchy, but also that is linked to the European oligarchy and situation through NATO and other networks, Bilderberg and other sorts of networks. And then the plutocracy is sitting on top of that. So we're in kind of a precarious position here. So we have to fight. And as Benjamin Franklin once said, well, we have a republic if we can keep it. And the forces that we've been discussing this evening don't want us to have a republic. They want us to have a fascist dictatorship and a one-party state. And that's coming if we don't fight for our own freedom. That's what I have to say. Good evening. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Cliff. And then just give me an indication, Diane, if you need to get going,
Dennis.
you're all right.
Yeah, I did want to say something because I think Ken misunderstood what I said, and what I said I mean and is important, which is that I didn't say it's irrelevant whether the Secret Service was involved or what they did. I said the congressional hearing is a fraud. It's an act. Think about the Congressional Commission on 9/11. Think about the Warren Commission. My point on bringing up Nord Stream is that they were handed the evidence on a silver platter by Seymour Hersh, and not one single congressman demanded an investigation of that. Now, we've had cases where congressmen have wanted to investigate things and have ended up dead in plane crashes and other things. So I'm not saying it would be easy, but I'm just saying that it is a kind of spectatoritis to watch a congressional hearing on this and think that there's something serious going on when they had something right in front of their nose, the biggest infrastructure act of terrorism in history with the blowup of the Nord Stream pipeline, Seymour Hersh's coverage of that, and not one single one of them would pursue it. Now, my second point is that, look, people really underestimate who we are. There is a reason why Helga Zepp-LaRouche keeps popping to the top of the CCD Ukrainian kill list, a list which I am also on, and others on this new list, TXT, which includes Trump and Kennedy and 112 members of Congress. And I'll give the example of what happened in the New York petitioning. I got on the ballot. The LaRouche candidate got on the ballot in 2022. I was the only person to do that. In 2024, Jose Vega and I both got on the ballot, and Kennedy will end up on the ballot after spending at least $3 million, maybe more, paying petitioners $90 an hour and paying lawyers tens of thousands of dollars for legal fights. So there's a sleight of hand where people have the illusion that other people are quote unquote important or effective because they are seen on television, they are not censored, etc. But I keep being astounded repeatedly when various things come up also related to electoral politics, where the LaRouche's presidential campaigns, the LaRouche candidates are the only people actually doing the real work, and other people have the illusion of it. That's it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Diane. All right, we're going to go to Monty. We unmute.
Monty and
Unmute,
then
okay.
yeah,
Great.
Okay, Dennis, thank you. I'd like to just drill down a little more with you, Dennis, on a comment you made insofar as the desperation of the deep state in going after Trump with this assassination attempt. And I was on a podcast with Tom Luango today, and he agreed with my assessment that that bullet came not only a quarter inch from taking out Trump, but it came a quarter inch for perhaps taking out our republic. In other words, you think about it, there at a minimum would have been absolute chaos. But given how the deep state works, that is evidenced such by the Maidan coup, let's take for instance, they would have put people on the streets that would have turned things upside down, inside out, and their intention is, it's not Trump, it's like Trump said, it's not him, but it's he's standing between us and them, but it's really the republic. And given that, I would just like you to comment, what would be your advice as the best defense or the best thing that Trump and his constituents could do to avert disaster? You know, some people say you ought to duck down, hide away, more protection, whatever. You know, he came up with this thing about an iron dome for the United States, which kinetic energy system, which wouldn't work. My proposal would be that he explicitly play the LaRouche card with the four powers, the four laws, just like Sergei Glasnev did. I mean, the Sergei Glasnev, the macroeconomics minister of Russia for the BRICS, he played the LaRouche card. Now, it might sound outlandish, but I think that's what we ought to be playing. That's what is needed. Is sometimes I don't want to necessarily use a sports metaphor, but sometimes the best defense is a good offense. So, what say you insofar as my comment?
Yeah, just be very clear, because this is something we can take up. Jose Vega has for 7 years, okay, ever since he was 17 years old, been making a point about another resident of his district named Gouverneur Morris. People know that there's a Constitution of the United States, and they know there's a preamble, but they don't know who wrote it. The person that wrote it was Gouverneur Morris. The name looks like governor, but with a U. That's his first name. And he was Alexander Hamilton's closest friend, and he wrote the preamble and he drafted much of the Constitution. Well, Trump has just mentioned McKinley. He's talked about him, and he has some appreciation of McKinley as a Republican, as a president. So what should be done is that we should emphasize that in less than a year, in about 9 months, we are going to be, those of us who know about it, will be celebrating the 250th birthday of this country. Because this country began its revolution on the 18th of April of 1775. That means on the 18th of April of 2025, we should be celebrating the 250th birthday of our country. How come people aren't even talking about that? Okay, now that's a thing to take to Trump supporters, Democrats, independents, everybody. How come we aren't even prepared intellectually, emotionally, psychologically to think about the birthday of this country? Who's stopping you in the deep state from doing that? Maybe we're the deep state. That's the way you handle certain kind of matters. And there's other questions we're going to keep, but I like people that let's let that hang out in the air for a minute. Just think about what I just said. That shows you our actual power. The power of this movement is its ideas and the ability to suddenly make people realize, whoa, how could I not be thinking that? Who controlled my thinking so I wasn't thinking that? Maybe I have work I have to do, and that's what we're basically putting forward to everybody, that we are the source of the power, actually. Not we should be the source. We are the source. And it is our denial of what we are supposed to be doing, which is the #1 problem in the United States. That is what the independent candidacies declare their independence from, that slave mentality. And that's what they're saying the rest of the people should do. Let's go to Ann Reynolds. Can we unmute Jose?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'll try to be quick. I'm always misunderstood on this stuff, Dennis, so forgive me. But I think we can, I get a text twice a day from Trump and Vance because I'm on some kind of weird list. But we can focus on Trump's and Vance's platform, not in the ways they suggest by going into their committees, but by simply addressing them publicly. Republicans do not know that free trade is not a good thing. They need to be reminded that Lincoln hated free trade. Trump and Vance can influence his followers in a way that no one else can. He needs to emphasize that the BRICS is not communism, socialism, or capitalism. It is a system for controlling speculation and regulating the economy through government-directed credit, which is 100% different than the money printing that is going on now. It requires international cooperation on a fiscal level that cannot be achieved without control of the speculators. Now, FDR did similar things with his fireside chats. I don't think anyone but Trump can do this. We can join the BRICS. That would fix it with the Oasis plan. And of course, as you said, get out of NATO. That's it.
Okay, very good. All right, can we go to Roman?
Yes, hello. My question is for Diane Sayre. What I know from studying history is that countries which are considered the leaders in commerce or the leaders in military power or geopolitical influence tend to have the strongest currency because they are able to extend more debt, extend more credit to grow their economies. And they're able to get away with this because the strength of their currency makes it easy to pay back international creditors. So the Dutch were the first to do it, then the British, then the United States most recently. And to reorganize the Federal Reserve to get rid of unnecessary debts in the Federal Reserve seems like it might, if not done properly, cause a lot of economic pain in the short run. Because what's holding up the US economy, in my opinion, is the strength of the dollar. The fact that we don't really produce as many material goods as China. Well, really, that's an understatement. Our productive capacity is much, much less than that of other countries. But because we have the strong dollar, and because of the strong dollar, which allows the US to presumably issue more debt, that's what's actually keeping the US economy, which is a consumption economy, what keeps it going. So I want to ask, I mean, relatively speaking to other countries, the US dollar is the strongest currency right now. So I just want more information. Like if you could send me like a resource on what it actually means to declare for the Federal Reserve to declare bankruptcy and to move away from a debt-based economic system. Because it's an idea that I've heard a lot about, but I don't know how it would actually work in terms of specifics. So that's my question.
Whoops, Dennis, can I
Yeah.
go ahead? Yeah, I think you are expressing some confusion about the difference between monetarism and economy in the way that Lyndon LaRouche would have looked at it, or Alexander Hamilton in particular, and the difference between debt. I'm sorry, there's a very playful dog here right now. Debt and credit. And the metric of economy is really not money or the stock market or anything else. It has to be the economy is created to serve human beings. So if you look at things like child poverty in the United States, you look at life expectancy, you look at infant mortality, these things tell the real story, which is the standard of living is collapsing. There are now only 14 states where an average income family can afford to buy a house. That's not a strong economy. The state of New York has 3 of our cities are among the top 10 in child poverty. We have child poverty rates in some parts of the state of over 40%. That's not a strong economy. So I can recommend a book by LaRouche called So You Wish to Learn All About Economics. I think you may be able to find it. I also would recommend reading Alexander Hamilton's paper on the subject of manufacturers, which I think gets at this clearly. The purpose of economy is to serve the growth of mankind, which means to create the conditions where each generation can have can be more populous, because population growth is actually a necessity, have a higher standard of living. And that is not a contradiction. That's the only way it works. But I appreciate you asking this because it's extremely important. It's fundamental.
Okay, very good. Now is Gary, I'm not seeing Gary's hand anymore. What happened to him? Is he there or not? And if not, I'm going to do some announcements. I see there's one other person in, but I had said we'd take 6. So I don't see him.
Gary's there. He appears to be unmuted. I don't know.
Yeah. Anybody seeing? I'm not hearing Gary. All right. Well, okay. If you get him, Jose, let me know. Let me now make a few announcements just so it's clear, because people have to get, I blame people at the beginning to get off. So we've talked about EIR. We've also, let me just say to people, we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We had quite a few people on. What do we want you to do? Well, we want you to work with the campaigns. That's one thing, very much so. Many of you know about what we've been doing on our petitioning. We're doing Saturday deployments. You can sign up for one of those to go out with us if you're in the New York City area. If you're not, we have the Friends of SARE also shortly the Friends of Vega. This means any place you are in the country, you can form a unit that can support the campaign, whether that's by doing a Zoom meeting. In some particular instances, you may be able to have people even travel to the area. But the relevant point is that we want people to be thinking about the independent candidacies and the principles of those candidacies, especially on economics. The third thing I want to point out is we talked about the interventions. Maybe Jose will say a little bit about that. If you know, I think people know what those are, but if you should just get in touch with us. We want to have a lot of people involved. There's all kinds of expressions of that. We should say that if you are college students or younger people, especially if they can travel, they can come into the area of the Bronx in New York City. We are about to start a set of classes, sort of an intensive set of kind of this thing that Cliff was talking about around teach-ins. But the idea really is an intensive 6 weeks, maybe even of immersion, to put it like that, into our discussions about history, foreign policy. Cliff referenced this idea of Washington's farewell address, the Declaration and the Constitution and the Federalist Papers, all being things that people should know. You're right. If you're supporting a congressional candidate, it's good to know what the Congress is, like what the legislative branch of government is, the problems of the executive branch, not merely Biden, but he represents the executive branch of government, which has tens of thousands of people under his control. How could he possibly be on top of that? But the idea is that we would wish people to be familiar with these ideas. And so we're going to be doing that as well. Finally, the idea of the daily work, which is our daily alert. This is a part of EIR, but we have a daily briefing, and the importance of that is that day-to-day developments can easily distort your actual picture of reality. Ironically, the more, as I say, the more detail you have, the less you know. So we just urge that people would subscribe for our daily alert as well. Okay, so that's the business I just wanted to get out of the way. We have one final person that wanted to say something, so we're going to go to Paul, I guess. If we can't get Gary, then we'll just have to pick him up otherwise. So, Paul?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, I do have a question regarding the American deficit. So we know that the American deficit is around $30 trillion. And 60% of that is from the Federal Reserve Bank. So the one printing the funds is the Federal Reserve Bank. So how exactly do you gonna pay back more than you print? If you print $1 million, you can't pay back more than $1 million. Even you should scratch and tax everyone to the bone. You wouldn't be able to pay back more than you print.
Okay, so your question is, how do you pay back the deficit? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, if you borrow from the Federal Reserve Bank, 60% of the American deficit is from the Federal Reserve Bank. The one printing the funds is the Federal Reserve Bank.
Okay, so you want to know the answer to that question. First of all, that's not the American debt, though you are correct. That's technically the American debt. It's more like about 38 trillion, by the way. But who's quibbling about $1 trillion, right? The entirety is unpayable for two reasons. Well, I won't go into all reasons, but a lot of it is also debt service. The service on the debt at this point is approximately equivalent to the entire American defense budget. I mean, that's the interest that we're paying on the debt. Now, while you could talk about various remedies and actions that could be taken, like a debt moratorium where you're not paying the interest payments and you're not doing that for a period of a year or 2 years or something, and you're allocating that money in those kinds of things are popular to say. That doesn't solve the problem either. Problem involved here is that you have to return to the use of the U.S. Treasury as opposed to the Federal Reserve. That is, now, people talk about abolishing the Federal Reserve. That's not a bad idea. But the problem involved is that you have a circumstance we've gotten ourselves into in which you have to be able to have the full faith and credit of the United States as an entity. And that is the basis upon which borrowing and deployment of credit would be done. Now, here's the issue. Most of the problem on this is that people think in terms of money rather than credit, which is a completely different thing. Money and credit are different. Even debt and credit can be different. Here's what the big difference is. Most of what we do in the United States is not productive at all. Almost the entire economy is fictional. Mining is real. Manufacturing is real. Agriculture are real. Infrastructure is real. There are different kinds of infrastructure. There's, of course, like roads, bridges, highways, tunnels, dams. That's obviously one kind of thing. And then there's what's called soft infrastructure, hospitals, schools, things of that nature. Here's the deal that the world would accept instantly. The United States said, you know what? The present monetary system is bankrupt. Most of the debt, particularly that is speculative from derivatives and so on, it's never going to be paid. It has to all be wiped out. What we've got to do is keep the banks functioning, the local banks functioning. We have to be able to pay the fundamental payments for people like unemployment insurance or things like that, basic paychecks. We have to keep the basic functions running. And what we propose is that we could create a set of relationships, deals, trade deals in particular, which allow us to do what are called forward-based contracts with various nations of the world to export to those nations, once again, industrial and agricultural product from the United States over a period. That's why the reason it's called forward-based, because you're going to have to restructure, restart the real American economy. Now, why are people going to accept that deal? They're going to accept that deal because they will realize that the last thing that the United States can afford to do under that circumstance is maintain the crazy military posture that it has all over the world. And that what it would have to do with the 700 to 1,000 military bases, depending on how you count them, is it would have to convert these into various forms of extended production capability, including integrating them into various portions of what's called the Belt and Road. That's how the Chinese call it, but which would be called by an American group, if it wanted to, the World Land Bridge. It's a proposal that Lyndon LaRouche devised. He invented it. What happened was the Chinese and others adapted for their own purposes this proposal, which was made by Lyndon LaRouche in 1989 and then refined in 1991, all while he was in jail. What happened was that the United States refused to listen to that because George Bush was president and George Bush was responsible for putting Lyndon LaRouche in jail. But the Russians began to listen because they collapsed. And after they collapsed, some of the representatives, including military representatives of the KGB, visited with the LaRouche organization in Germany. I was present for one such meeting and admitted they had been wrong and suggested that there were another way, another possibility that we might want to pursue. And we did that. And what is called today, what was used to be called by a different name, the New Silk Road, which is the name that it used to be called, was a proposal that we began discussion with the Chinese government with in 1991. At the point that the Chinese, as the period of around after post the Deng Xiaoping period, they were beginning the transition. At that point, they had been involved in it for some time, for about a 10-year period. We had a lot of disagreements with them at the time. The Russians were completely taken over by London and Wall Street at that time, and were being looted like crazy, depopulated like crazy, until Vladimir Putin came in and saved Russia from Wall Street and the city of London, which would have depopulated it and destroyed it, as it did for 8 years. So in answer to your question about the Federal Reserve, the problem involved is because of Lyndon LaRouche's incarceration and the fact that people would never listen to us, the United States continued to accumulate crazy debt. So what the issue is, and the issue is to be conserved here, and the conclusion is, if you want to, we want to have a solution to this, all you have to do, step one, take the federal, you have to declare bankruptcy. True. You have to declare that much of this stuff is not unpayable. Two, you would then have to begin a process of being able to issue directed credit for productive purposes. But you can't get to the second step unless you make a deal internationally through what's called a new security and development architecture, because you got to have interlocutors. Trump has some instinctive idea about this. And those interlocutors make the deal to create a productive economy. You cancel the debt, you cancel Wall Street out. And what you go is with mining, manufacturing, agriculture, infrastructure, a real economy. The American people will do fine. The banks will go crazy. The financiers will be off the chart. A lot of people are going to find themselves going out of buildings, not because we're going to push anybody. And that is the solution in the short term that will frankly either happen or you're going to get thermonuclear war. So that's just something to say. That's sort of everybody else has already bailed, which is, I think, was smart. We see 112 people still on. That's great. Jose, why don't you close us out here?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for getting on. And ultimately, I think no matter what, you have to mobilize. I think that's why everybody got on this call tonight. You know that there is something in you that says you have to do something. And you may not know all the answers yet, and you may not even understood everything that was said tonight, but something has to be done. And at the very least, that you're mobilizing and you're organizing, even if it's just getting somebody on this call again, which I don't know if this is going to be recurring. I think the idea is for it to be recurring, but we are walking away today with the people who are on this call being the committee of reason. We're not forming one. We formed one already. Just by the nature that you listened to us and you chose to participate in this, you are now part of this Council of Reason. And your job is to go and recruit other people to also be part of the Council of Reason and make sure we don't blow ourselves up this year.
Yeah, I'll just say in terms of anything ongoing, be aware we're going to be, this may happen again next week. It's obvious that we don't know what's going to happen during the week, less like last week. And that's why we wanted to call you together. But please be in touch with the campaign. We will be having notices come out. Our Monday night regular meeting, yes, that's what we do want to have. It may be of this form. We don't know yet. But stand by. There are some other speakers and others that we can invite and may wish to participate. And if you had positive response to this, let us know. If there are things that you can volunteer to do, please let us know. If there are contributions, financial or otherwise, you want to make, please let us know. And if there's something else that we can do, including speaking to other groups, please let us know. There may also be people that you have in mind or would think that we ought to be in touch with, that we're not in touch with, that could help us in this enterprise. Let us know about that. So, Jose, I think that's it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it. I'd like to thank everybody again for getting on and have a good night. And I look forward to seeing all the change you guys bring. So.